All right, rock and roll. Welcome one, welcome all to the Scorched Earth Political Podcast. I am your host, John. And if you could hit that like and subscribe button, it means a lot to us. And yeah, I know I missed a couple days here, and you little rascals out there thought you were going to get lucky and I was going to disappear. My promise to you is I will be here longer than Donald Trump is on the political stage. Let us make sure we're about that. And if you could, drop something in the comments. I hope everybody had a happy and blessed Christmas. It was kind of crazy out here in Southern California. We got quite a bit of rain. I almost wanted to build an ark, but we somehow survived it. Kind of like, I think it's a metaphor for what the 2025 year was politically. This is going to be our year in review. We are going to discuss some of the more politically divisive, more monumental things that happened this year. And, you know, we look back a year ago and I was doing some research and yeah, because I'm more than a pretty face, right? And, you know, I looked at the things that was going on in the Biden administration in 2024 and 2023. And literally, you know, there was some scuffles, there was kerfuffles with Congress, some different things, but on the international scene, everything was pretty much humming along. Yeah, we had issues. There was inflation. I'm not going to argue that. But it was coming down, especially in the last year. There was border issues, absolutely. These are things that contributed to Joe Biden's defeat, or Kamala Harris. Let's put them together. And now we are in the ecosystem of Trump 2.0. Basically, his 10th year on the political scene. And wow. What a year. It is funny, and I know this is going to come as a shock to everybody out there, that Donald Trump told a couple lies on the political campaign trail. You know, going to solve the Ukraine war in 24 hours. Prices are going to go down the first day. Inflation's going to be eliminated. I will say that he did shut off the border like he did say he would do. I don't think anybody had a real conception of what was going to come with ICE and the onslaught on migrants, legal and illegal in America. You know, they are still people. They do deserve due process. Just because everybody drops in the comments that, hey, they're here illegally, it does not stop due process. Due process in the United States Constitution is afforded every man, woman, and child, regardless of citizenship. But let's not denigrate that. Also, Donald Trump did talk about he was going to pardon the January 6th rioters who tried to overthrow the political process. And he did do that, but he did quite a bit more. Let's get to it. Let's burn it all to the ground. Welcome back to Scorched Earth. Get ready. It's going to be quite the half hour here. And Donald Trump came in January of this year, January 20th to be exact. And there was a very seamless transition. Donald Trump, actually in December, when he was in the Oval Office with Joe Biden, said that Joe Biden's staff was very accommodating, was very understanding, was very seamless in terms of what his political team wanted to do. And even though I disagree vehemently with the Trump administration, he won the election. He did. This isn't some poppycock, which in 2021, they were claiming the election was rigged. At the end, Joe Biden smoked Donald Trump in 2020. I mean, smoked. And, you know, Donald Trump, with his fragile male ego, couldn't handle that. But let's get to what this political term is. We don't need to adjudicate things that happened in the past, but I guess we will. So January 20th, in a slew of executive orders, his first day in office, which, you know, he couldn't get the cameras there quick enough. He pardoned every January 6th rioter, protester, whatever you want. All the ones who were criminally convicted in a court of law or through the judicial system. These were either plea agreements or they were convicted by a jury of their peers. And there was over 154 who had the most serious crimes. I'm not even talking about Terrio and the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys who were convicted of seditious conspiracy. I'm talking about ones who actually assaulted the brave men and women in law enforcement. They actually put hands on them. They actually physically assaulted them. They were also given full pardons. And even as Susie Wiles said in that Vanity Fair, she said, I was kind of surprised. That's the chief of staff for Donald Trump. She says, I was surprised how far he went with the January 6th pardons. I talked about in January and February, I thought the DNC should run ads showing the rioters and then showing him auto-pinning everybody getting a pardon. You know, we are dealing with a party that literally freaked the F out over Hunter Biden. Joe Biden, let's go back on that. Joe Biden's the president, the DOJ, which he allowed Merrick Garland to stay as independent as humanly possible, actually went after criminal charges for Hunter Biden. I'm not going to get into them. I think they were all BS, but okay, fine. We're living in that world. Let's call it what it is. But Joe Biden, do you think Donald Trump for 1 second would let criminal charges by Pam Bondi and this corrupt DOJ go after one of his kids? If you do, literally send whatever you're on to me, because literally you are checked out from reality. Absolutely unequivocally. Also on the first day, Donald Trump signed an executive order to end birthright citizenship. Basically, the Constitution, I'm not going to get into all the little legal, I'm not going to get into all the legalese, okay? This is Scorched Earth. We're trying to cut it what it is. What happens is, if you are born here in the United States or a territory of the United States, John McCain was actually born in Panama. He became a U.S. citizen because he was in a U.S. territory, that you are automatically granted U.S. citizenship. Well, Donald Trump wanted to take that away from people whose one of their parents wasn't actually a citizen at the time of their birth in the continental or surrounding territories, I guess Hawaii and Alaska count too, of being a citizen. This did go to the courts. It is still being pondered by the Supreme Court. Also on his first day, which is something we did not have on the bingo card, he eliminated full agencies. The most prominent one was USAID. This was a government agency where we helped people in other countries from starvation, disease, medical situations. The budget, when you look at the $7 trillion budget, it was $3 billion. Okay, $3 billion is $3 billion. I mean, I don't even know if that'll fill up and put new cushions on the Qatari jet that Donald Trump got, but I digress. That was immediately stopped. And where it became quite the conundrum, or I think most legal experts called it illegal, was that Congress in September passed the federal budget. Congress, the Senate, Joe Biden signed it, and it was funded for the full year till the next September. Well, in January, he said, no, that's it. We're not going to fund it. Now, for all you MAGAs out there, let's think about this when I'm president in 3 years, okay? I come in on January 20th and I say, you know what? I don't like the military. I don't. We're not going to fund it. You would melt the F down, because legally I would not have that ability. You don't. Congress passed a budget. It had to be filled out to the end of its term in September. Now, we can argue in September if they want to continue with USAID. That is the democratic process. But Donald Trump said, nope, we're just not going to fund it. I'm not going to let him send the checks. The Supreme Court, in following rulings, allowed him to do that. He also cut funding for many budgetary agencies, the IRS, Homeland, just HHS, CDC, NIH. Literally, in the first 2 weeks, he cut $2.5 billion in cancer research and other assorted scientific studies. Now, we're not going to know how many people are going to die because of the delay in finding cures for whatever malady or medical situation they did, but you could be damn sure there's going to be a significant number of people who will die prematurely or whatever phraseology you want to use, because of that cut. That's whataboutism. That is the crux of the Republican Party. They do not fix anything. They want to go in there with a sledgehammer. They want to break every effing thing. They have no solutions. They have no path forward. They are literally like Neanderthals in the Colosseum with a sledgehammer. Just bust it out. Now that we busted it down, where are we going to have the games? Oh, I don't know. Maybe we'll figure it out. Oh, wait, we're going to blame the Democrats. He cut 50% of the staff at Social Security. He cut 18% at the IRS. He cut, this is on the first day, he cut environmental protection. There was massive cuts at NOAA, which is the weather service. That's going to come into a little more play down the road here. When we saw what happened in Texas, I believe it was in July, he allowed Doge and his henchman, Elon Musk, you know, the guy who donated $300 million to his political campaign and then couldn't get his seat at the government. Of course, he wasn't approved by Congress, but, you know, why use the law? He just got to come in there and access sensitive government data. Him and his little Doge team. Treasury, Social Security, Health and Human Services, to say the least. That is just what we know. And one of the beautiful things about our government before pre-Trump 2.0 is there was walls so that they couldn't access your data. Treasury was different than Social Security. Social Security was different than CDC. Your data was secured inside that little pot. Well, they knocked down all the walls. Literally, our information, our precious, vital, personal information, HIPAA, everything else is on a thumb drive in some kid's, 25-year-old kid's pocket. What is going to be the result of it? I don't know. But we will see. They fired over 400,000 federal workers. Some came back. But Donald Trump, 2 weeks ago in December, was claiming proudly that he had seen the loss of at least 217,000 jobs. So 400,000 got wiped out in January, early February. The final total for the year, according to Donald Trump, is 217,000. Yeah, we're off and running. Let's get to it. Let's talk about February. That's when he instituted his amazing tariff policy. That was on steel and aluminum, Chinese goods. That was February 10th. He came in, he talked about tariffs. This was no surprise, I think, to the extent that the tariffs came at such an escalating rate that it did catch a lot of people off guard. Now, one of his mantras was Joe Biden had too low of tariffs on these other countries. Fun fact, Joe Biden continued the policies that Donald Trump set in 2017 with every other country in the world. They literally doubled under Trump 2.0 or Trump 1.0 from 1.2% to basically 2 to 2.5% for almost every country. Now Donald Trump immediately goes up to 10, 20, 30, 40, even 50% in certain situations. Pam Bondi, also in February, told Fox News that she had the entire client list for the Epstein files and the files on her desk. Wow. Interesting. February 14th, a federal judge blocked Doge for the 4 weeks, basically, or 3.5, accessing all the government data. As we know with most things Trumpian, I'm not sure they really followed that. Also included was Treasury data. Don't worry, it's just yours and mine, personal financial information. In March, and this was truly a rant of mine, the feckless Chuck Schumer, the leader of the Democrats in the Senate, caved to Donald Trump and continued the government funding, avoiding a government shutdown. Fun fact, we're going to see what happened there in October, but Chuck Schumer said, I'm trying to save people's jobs and the government services. Yeah, how did that work, Chuck? Tell that to the 400,000 people who got laid off. Trump then signed an executive order in February eliminating the Department of Education. That is something he had talked about. He put the truly incompetent Linda McMahon at the helm, and literally it was like a blind person driving a car down a winding mountain road. Literally, she did not know what she's doing. She still does not know. All they are doing is starving out the funding, and it is really affecting people with special needs and national educational standards. 25% tariffs were then put in, up from 2%, on Canada and Mexico in the middle of February. Thank you, both of you countries, for being such great friends for all the last 60 years. Here's your reward. You're going to get your tariffs busted up by 12 times, 12x. He did then pause all military aid to the country of Ukraine. Remember, the one when they got rid of the nuclear weapons, we promised to defend them forever. Well, I guess that was before Donald Trump took the helm. There was the Signal Group chat with Pete Hegseth, the defense secretary, later to be named the Defense Department of War. That's where he had, on an unsecured Signal chat, he was talking about and developing war plans in Yemen. Unfortunately, because of their true incompetence, they included a journalist. Yeah, that happened. Okay, so now we're going to go, wow, we're only in February. I hope everybody's ready. Okay. Oh, sorry. That part there was in March. My bad. Thank God for a podcast. Okay, hey, look, it all starts melding together, okay? My mind feels like it's going to explode. Have a little love. Okay? That was March. Okay? All right. In April, specifically April 4th, there was a dramatic change in U.S. trade policy that now, because of the increased tariffs, that was Liberation Day. Right? Where he got out with his funky little charts and said, we are going to, I can't remember the country offhand, okay? Hey, it's late December, okay? My mind's at ease. But he was talking about some island we didn't even have a trade deficit with, and they have penguins. I want to say the Galapagos, but I know it's not that. And it was like, okay, it was on the chart. We're going to increase their tariffs by 50%. All right, you do whatever you need to. Also, in the beginning of April, Donald Trump was busy doing some business, personal business, at the Doral Country Club, which he owns in Miami, with Saudi business leaders and government officials. And he was not at Andrews Air Force Base for, I believe, Andrews or Dover. It was Dover, excuse me. For a dignified transfer of 4 U.S. soldiers who were killed tragically in Lithuania. Okay. Can you imagine if that had been Joe Biden? You know, Joe Biden was there at Dover at 3 o'clock in the morning with his wife to receive the remains of 2 U.S. service people who had been killed. And if you remember that, Fox literally, Joe Biden inadvertently looked at his watch, and Fox literally ran that for months. Oh, too busy to be there, huh, Mr. President? At least he showed up. Also, in April, Russia launched a new offensive in Ukraine. You know, that's one of the things that we're looking at. We've talked about it extensively here, is the Russian winter. And as Hitler, as Napoleon, both found out, and we find out things really don't change that much. Once winter comes, your positions are ensconced. Once the winter breaks, that's when new offensives start. Of course, now, a couple weeks after Donald Trump quit all new aid to Ukraine, all of a sudden they launch a new offensive to take up more land. And I would say, foreign policy-wise, the two biggest things that I really think were the hallmark of this administration were him, Donald Trump, rolling out the red carpet for convicted war criminal Vladimir Putin, who has launched multiple wars, Crimea, Ukraine to be the first two. He rolled out the red carpet in America for this man, versus when Vladimir Zelensky came to the Oval Office and J.D. Vance, put away the eyeliner for a little while and put on the boxing gloves because he wanted to be mano a mano. And they literally, Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, tag team Zelensky, not the good tag team, the bad one, and they beat him up. And to me personally, that was a moment of shame. This is somebody who had been a very, very erstwhile and honest ally for us. But the problem with that is that was 5 years of pent-up frustration from the Trump administration because Vladimir Zelensky would not go along with his request in 2019 to investigate Joe Biden before the election. Because there was nothing. But sometimes that guy don't forget, right? Let's also go over to Gaza. Israel continued airstrikes, started a blockade, which would become an epic famine of food, medicine, and other personnel that started truly the worst humanitarian crisis on the planet this year. Even after the peace agreement later on in the year in October, we still have not seen a true alleviation of this humanitarian crisis. The UN has still said that only 1/3 of the necessary supplies, food, water, are getting into these people. April 5th was Liberation Day. We talked about that. 10% baseline up from 2%. Okay. China got hit with 125%. These are taxes that you and I pay. This whole notion that Navarro, Trump the importers are paying it. No, they're not. They may absorb it a little in the beginning, but eventually, like any cost in business, it is going to go to the consumer, or they are just going to quit supplying the good or the service. It's just economics. If you think, look, there's companies making real money out there. I'm not arguing that. But what I will say is, if you really think there's businesses out there making 125% on Chinese goods, I want what you're smoking. Really. Yeah, right. Because you're not in this world. Bob Lazar, Area 51, alien technology, go ahead. Because that's where you are. Also, on Liberation Day, he talked about 90 major trade deals in 90 days. Of course, after 90 days, there was only 5. We still don't have 90 days. The transparent Trump administration is being very opaque, very, I want to say deceptive would probably be a good word, but I really don't want to use that word because I know they don't understand what that is. I'm just going to say straight out blatant, they are blocking any information going into the public sector about where we actually are on trade deals. Of course, they still in those 90 days did not get a trade deal with China. Ooh, fun fact. All right, let's go to May. And May was a big month. Well, I guess every month's been a big month, right? They revoked Harvard's ability to enroll foreign students, demanding that all the students there at Harvard who are foreign would either transfer or Harvard would lose their tax-exempt status. Now, one of the things we have talked about previously on this is foreign students are literally a boon to American-born students who go to universities. It is something that is not really understood. One thing about foreign students, they have to pay full pop. They get no financial aid. They get no government grants. They get no tuition tax credits. They pay the full boat. So I believe at Harvard this year, it was $80,000. Now, what does that money do? Oh, okay, it's taking a slot from American. Yeah, okay, I can hear MAGA already barking in my ear. What it does is it subsidizes it so that those financial breaks can happen for American students. Look, Harvard has a budget. And let's just say, for argument's sake, it's $1 million. And they have to get $1 million in tuition to keep the university functioning on a huge level. It's probably closer to $1 billion, but let's just use $1 million. It'll be a little easier for the MAGAs in the audience to understand what I'm trying to get, because a couple more zeros are just going to blow their mind. Why don't you guys go back to the 2020 election? But if you have $1 million to make everything work at Harvard, and the foreign students are going to make up 25%, but they're paying half of that money, 25%, 50 means, for MAGA, $500,000. So now the 75% only have to pay the other 50%. So instead of paying that $80,000 or whatever, now theirs goes down to 40 or 30 or whatever it is. It's a huge, significant decline that American students have to shoulder because of foreign students in American colleges. They're not taking a place, they're subsidizing Americans' education in the system. But we got to keep the fear-mongering going, don't we? Also, 100 of the top officials at the National Security Agency were let go. This was something that really, it's a shocker. What are you going to really do about that? Literally, the people who deal with the most delicate, sensitive intelligence were let go. And we all know what the litmus test was. Oh, did you vote for Trump? Have you said anything contrary when they try illegal stuff? Oh, you did? Okay, you're gone. Sayonara, have a nice life. All right, let's get to June. And this is where the push came for the big, beautiful bill. It ended up being passed on July 4th and signed into law. It was basically an extension of the Trump tax credits from 2017. And among the other highlights, or what we would call lowlights, it defunded Planned Parenthood. It increased healthcare costs for over 1 million people on Medicare currently. It cut SNAP by anywhere from 20 to 45%, basically food assistance for the most vulnerable people in our society. They started a new student loan repayment plan that increased monthly payments. One analysis showed that it would increase the typical borrower's payment by $2,900 a year. Now, that did not become that poignant because they were not going after people who were delinquent on their student loans. Fun fact, starting January, they are going to go after you like they are a car loan. They are going to impugn your credit rating. They are going to lien on your wages. They are going to make judgments against you. That's real. Joe Biden basically waived that after COVID. Okay? A lot of people have a lot of outstanding student loans. Personally, I'm for forgive student loans. You don't need to have these kids go to college, try and do the right thing, and then literally saddled with a house payment for the rest of their life before they get their life even going. But that's another issue on another show. Also, they slashed $30 billion for NIH research in this bill. Another $30 billion. Like, wow. Wow. They also, this is the cute little part of the big, beautiful bill that didn't really get a lot of notice. They were literally hanging on like a cat on a ledge of a building. Every vote was so important. Elise Stefanik was going to be the UN envoy for the United States. They couldn't afford her to leave Congress from New York, so they said, sorry, not sorry. You got to stay here and vote for the big, beautiful bill. Don't worry, we're gonna get you on the governor thing a little later on in the year. Of course, they betrayed her again. Hey, mess around, find out, right? Listen to this. So they were so close on the votes, they had to get Lisa Murkowski of Alaska. And one of the things they did was incentivized waste and poor program administration for SNAP. And basically what happened was SNAP had a program to try and make it as efficient as possible. And the states that were not efficient, that they had wasteful money, they would get less money on SNAP. So there's an incentive to be more efficient, to get the money into the hands of the people. Literally, SNAP is one of the most efficient government programs. ROI, return on investment, is about 8-1. Literally, if you look at programs that the government is so good at, unemployment, disability, Social Security, SNAP, things like that, because when the money goes in, the people have to pay bills. They're not putting them in stock funds. They're not putting them in T-bills. They're not putting them in crypto. They might be doing that. But because Alaska was so bad, was so terribly inefficient in administering their SNAP programs, and because they need Lisa Murkowski's vote, they decided, no, we're not going to do that anymore. We're just going to give you a flat fee. You do whatever you want. You want to go to Vegas, you want to gamble, kumbaya. You do you. Yeah. There we go, right? That's a real thing. They also cut 20 million people from Medicaid. That was probably the thing that stood out the most. Of course, what they do is they make Medicaid so difficult to access that people will start falling off. That's how they do it. And believe me, if anybody out there has ever dealt with a government program, it's very difficult. And if you don't have people inside the walls to help guide you through it, because most people, when they get there, they want to do it the first time. I have friends who are getting ready for Social Security and they say, I just want to do everything right. No kidding. Like opposed to the people who want to F it up. Duh. The only way you do that is when you have assistance from people inside the walls, inside SNAP, inside Medicaid, inside Social Security. Of course, they're cutting the staff. So now, instead of getting an answer back in a week, it may be a month, if you get one at all. It's a real thing. Let's get to July, and we're going to end up this segment in July. The big, beautiful bill passed. Donald Trump had his military parade, fun fact, on his birthday, because that's what tyrants do. And let's just talk about some more of the things about the big, beautiful bill. There's $1 trillion of our government that were given away to the top 10% of people in the income. They basically got $1 trillion tax break. It was continued from Trump 1.0, the 2017 tax bill. You and I didn't get any tax relief. They did we're gonna go from $6,000 to $12,000 for each deduction. Well, like myself, if you're single, good luck. Thanks, John. Hey, maybe adopt a Haitian family. The ones that eat dogs and cats. Like I said, 20 million people were cut from Medicaid. They also eliminated all incentives for renewable energy. They also made massive cuts to the electric car industry. Those $7,500 tax credits ended in September. They cut SNAP. But on the bright side, they increased the budget of ICE and Homeland Security to $170 billion over 4 years, which is more than the defense budget of Russia, the UK, and Greece combined. Yeah, right? Also in July, we had the Texas floods. Now, this is where NOAA was cut. Homeland Security under Kristi Noem, the incompetent cosplay acting secretary, made a policy that nothing could be approved over $100,000 without her express signature. Now, when you're talking about natural disasters, literally just getting trucks out there is a $100,000 bill. When you want to deploy airplanes, food, resources to help people who are literally being killed, that is in the millions of dollars. It is money well spent because we are Americans. It is amazing how much a disaster cost. But when, I went out to I did a podcast on this. I went out to the Altadena fires in January in California, and it is so devastating. It is so bloody devastating. And the resources it takes to get these people back on their feet is immense. And it's worth every effing cent. It is. You can go ahead and kiss my butt on billionaires getting their Gulfstream 5s or 7s or whatever, being able to write them off in the first year. That was in this bill. They have a better write-off depreciation than airlines do for jumbo airliners. But as the Texas floods happened, it was also a situation where the floods killed 136 people. And they didn't have an early warning system. NOAA was disabled. Kristi Noem, because of her policy, was not able to deploy first responders as quickly. Fun fact, Mexico actually sent 35 first responders up to help us in Texas. Of course, that didn't get much play. Thank you, Fox News. But Joe Biden in 2022 tried to get an early warning system, and Texas immediately put their finger up and go, we don't need no stinking socialist money. Eventually, they took the money, but they put it into law enforcement. They took that money and went to law enforcement at the border, which it's illegal, but okay. When the Republicans do something illegal, that's okay. When they take troops, National Guard, when they take police officers and put them for border enforcement, which is the purview of the federal government, I thought, okay, they can do that. But God forbid that the Democrats in Chicago, Portland, anywhere else resist the government bringing in national troops, National Guard. I guess, it's just one hand washes the other type thing, right? Also, and we'll talk about this in the entertainment year in review, Paramount, trying to get their merger with Skydance, canceled Stephen Colbert. Now, Brendan Carr, the FCC chairman, basically said, we are no longer an independent agency. We work for the Trump administration. And basically, he said, we are going to do what the big boss wants. He does not like Stephen Colbert. He did not like Jimmy Kimmel, as we will see later on in the year what happened there. It is in the first 6 months here, and that's all we're going to go in this segment, is we saw for the first time the presidency truly being personalized. We saw an administration that did not have any guardrails, any barriers. Now, there was some court rulings to kind of rein it in, but some they listened to and some they didn't. Look at Abrego Garcia. A federal judge told them not to deport him. They put him on a plane. He was in San Salvador. They literally, every step of the way with Abrego Garcia, they have violated federal law. They have violated federal judges' rulings. There you go. So now, starting January 20th, we're to the end of July. All right? We're going to finish up the year. Let's see. August, September, October, November, December. Hey, little spoiler alert when you watch that podcast, it's not going to get much better. Not going to get much better. But I want you to hit like and subscribe. I want you to tell your friends to. Leave a comment. Tell me what you thought of Trump 2.0, 2025, the year in review. And we'll see you soon on the Scorched Earth Political Podcast.